All right, so let's start with a look back at 2023 for Ethereum. We had the Shanghai upgrade this year. We had that huge price recovery from the lows at the start of the year. What was the big story for Ethereum in 2023?
To be honest, I don't think there was a big story for Ethereum. I think that's part of what's kind of going on with the most recent Ethereum price action. It's Ethereum has done everything that it said that it would over the last 3, 4, 5 years, right? Proof of stake has happened. L2s are happening. Everything is kind of set up for Ethereum to really dominate. But hasn't been a huge catalyst, I would say, this year. It's just been a slow grind back up.
Yeah, that slow grind you mentioned layer twos and some of the other things that are working in the background on Ethereum. And 2023 was sort of touted as the year to build for developers and in crypto and Web3. And how did that idea of heads down and build really translate into the network this year, especially at a time when there's been a slowdown in trading volume and VC funding across the board?
I think we're seeing a lot of things that were funded even over the last, cycles, say from 2020, 2021, even into 2022, that are going live now, only at the end of the year. A lot of this tech can take a long time to build, and it can take a while for it to come to fruition. Similarly with the overall Ethereum roadmap, the kind of core technical upgrades have taken quite a while to get to where they need to be. So I think that everything is positioned now for Ethereum to really dominate next year. But throughout this year, it really has been heads down building, and a lot of people are scrambling even as we kind of round out the end of the year to get things live this year so that they're ready to go for next year.
If we look ahead to 2024, JP Morgan recently put out a report that said Ethereum would outperform Bitcoin in the new year thanks to proposed upgrades to reduce transaction costs and boost speeds. Do you agree with that sentiment that the upgrades that are coming are going to be such a boon for the Ethereum network, even with hype around spot Bitcoin ETFs here in the US or the halving that may drive interest in Bitcoin?
I think the interesting thing this cycle is that Ethereum has now been the number 2 asset for, other than like a brief blip where Ripple passed it for a few months in 2018, 2019, about 7 years. It's been the number 2 crypto asset, right? And for good reason. It has dominated transaction activity. It's dominated the narratives from NFTs to decentralized finance. And we now are sort of in this position where as Bitcoin as it typically does at the start of a cycle, as the Bitcoin dominance cycle starts to grow, what would typically happen is those Bitcoin profits would be rotated out into alternative assets, right? Longer tail assets, and Ethereum was typically one of those. But it feels to me like Ethereum is now in a position where it has become so dominant that people are actually skipping over Ethereum and going to things like Solana and even layer 2 scaling solutions and longer tail assets, more speculative assets. And so I think Ethereum is kind of a victim of its own success in that regard a little bit, because it has been so dominant for so long and people don't see the upside in it. That said, Ethereum has a habit throughout a bull market of having these kind of crazy catalyst weeks where it can go 5, 10, 15, 20% up in a week. And I do think we'll see that in 2024. But what the catalyst will be, we don't necessarily know ahead of time.
Yeah, you brought up some of the competition there, and I was actually going to ask you as part of my next question, where the competition for Ethereum stands as we head into 2024. You talked about Solana. I also think about Polygon and some of the others. How much trouble will they be for Ethereum? I hate to call it trouble because they're all working towards similar goals. They're all trying to build on their own respective networks. But how much competition will that be for Ethereum as we head into 2024? Or is it still poised to be the solid number 2 compared to Bitcoin?
So I think there's 2 components there. Crypto is always a competition for attention, right? And at the moment, Bitcoin is very much in the limelight, as you say, due to ETFs and the halvening and some of these things that are coming up, some of these events that are coming up. And Ethereum doesn't necessarily have any like one catalyst like that. It has been this slow growth, right? What has happened though over the last year is there has been this consolidation around the Ethereum ecosystem in terms of the layer 2 scaling, right? That Ethereum roadmap of Ethereum mainnet as the data layer and all of these other execution layers in the form of Polygon, Arbitrum, Optimism, etc. We've seen even huge companies like Coinbase using Ethereum and Optimism as their sort of foray into these on-chain transactions, and so that's been a really powerful narrative that we've seen. What has also happened is some of the competing layer one networks, the other networks that were taking attention away from Ethereum, have kind of pivoted to come back into the ecosystem and become L2s, right? So Celo is a great example of that. What that's done, I think, has created a bit of a power vacuum for Solana to be this credible threat. And so I think we will probably see this cycle, Solana get solidified as like the number 3 crypto asset, where you'll have Bitcoin, then Ethereum as the dominant smart contract platform, but Solana as this fast follower platform that will likely take up a lot of attention and have a lot of activity happening in that ecosystem.
Something that you just said goes right into my last question, which was, what do you see for institutional adoption of Ethereum? And, institutions seem to be getting more and more interested in crypto once again for things like tokenization of real world assets. And so what's Ethereum's role in that going forward? And can it capture that attention versus some of its competitors?
I think it will. And again, I think this is what's going to happen in terms of this slow grind up or, this slow growth for Ethereum. There is no major catalyst. It's just going to be constant adoption. It is by far the dominant platform. And, it's the dominant platform for a reason. It has the best tech. It has the best, engineers. It has, the widest adoption. And so I think that as an institution looking to do things with smart contracts, Ethereum's the obvious choice. It's becoming a little bit like, the old IBM trope of, no one ever got fired for choosing IBM. And so choosing Ethereum becomes just the obvious default choice. That said, I think Solana and potentially some of the other chains will have a chance to challenge Ethereum. But for now, it's really going to be, I think, Ethereum's game to lose. And then the question is, can Ethereum do what the Ethereum community has been predicting for a very long time, either next year or the following year in the cycle, which is flip Bitcoin? Because that would be the real catalyst. If Ethereum is able to flip Bitcoin, which requires a 4 or 5x price appreciation relative to Bitcoin, that would extremely catalyze, I think, the next couple of years of activity and shift the narrative. But it's, again, that's for Ethereum to kind of pull off.